Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Pull Up Tray podcast. I'm Samson Folk. I'm not joined by the tray that pulls up, Javon Heath. He's at a concert. However, this lined up with an Indiana Pacers game, and Caitlin Cooper is here to discuss the Pacers, yes, a little bit, and also the Raptors at large. They are now 14-5 after beating the Pacers on a game winner from Brandon Ingram. The Raptors attempted like 4 different actions to pick out Ingram on Siakam. None of them went that well. None of them, like Ingram hit 2 very tough shots. He didn't get a good look. And regardless of structure, at the end of a game, you hand a guy the ball, he hits a game winner. That's the benefit of a Brandon Ingram. Caitlin, the Pacers, if they played as well as they did defensively tonight, they probably wouldn't be where they are in the standings. But how do you feel about this game and where we're at right now?
I'm not the Trey who pulls up, and I'm not at a concert, but Brandon Ingram has been orchestrating a lot of good offense for the Raptors at the end of games. So the Pacers are at the brunt end of that. As you said, they were hunting stuff against Siakam, but not really, because it started out being that Benedict Mathurin was
Yep.
guarding Brandon Ingram, and he
Easy
couldn't get
bucket.
through. He couldn't get through on the cross screens. Which I made this joke when I was talking to Blake, and I made this joke a few days ago that the Raptors were running nonstop cross screens for Brandon Ingram against the Brooklyn Nets to the point where you could see Darko in the background every time down the court, being like, as if it was some massive secret that the cross screen was coming. And then I watched the Pacers be picked apart by the same basic action until they ended up having to put then flip flop that matchup and put Ben onto Scottie, and then they tried to
And
go to
they, yep.
Scottie on a cross screen. So
Yeah. Also poetic in some sense. Listen, Raptors fans are no enemy of Pascal Siakam. A million of them followed mine and Caitlin's work covering the Pacers in the finals. The cheer he got was huge when he got announced at the game tonight. And on top of that, though, he did get traded. Brandon Ingram did come back in, and him hitting the game winner over him, for some people, that's a bit of poetry. Caitlin, what do you make of? I guess we'll start there, and then I'm going to give you some fun little feedback from or insights from my time at the arena. But the Pascal Ingram dynamic. I guess the interesting thing is that Ingram is in not the role that Siakam had, but partially. You know what I mean? Like looking
mhm.
at the sunrise sunset aspect of it is mostly what I'm saying. What do you make of the Raptors at this point?
I think there's some similarities in that it simplified Scottie's role and allowed him to really rededicate himself to the defensive end of the floor because I thought he was tremendous defensively. I think
Hmm.
that most games where I see at least one or two plays where it's like, that's a wow that you're going to want to clip and share later on. And it also allows him to be catching more attacking passes at the rim, do more of the things offensively that makes sense for him. And that was there when he played with Pascal, and that's now back when he plays with Ingram. As you said, they attack a little bit differently, so it's not exactly the same. I think you get more defensively from Pascal than what the Raptors are currently getting from Brandon Ingram, but I'm sure that there's nobody regretting that the Toronto Raptors traded for Brandon Ingram last spring at this point in time because, we talked about this briefly when I was mentioning Tyrese being out and the fact that that's completely put all of the roles for the Pacers out of whack. Having Brandon Ingram has put a lot of the roles for the Toronto Raptors back in sync and where you want them to be. So a rising tide lifts all boats, so to speak.
I love a rising tide. Very big fan of such things. So the insights, and I'm going to ask you a question now. I said something which I thought was insightful, and I said something that was really stupid. So this wasn't in the scrum before the game, but when I was catching up with Rick, I felt like when you say like you too to the person who says enjoy the movie. So we had an aside. I shook his hand and I said, "How's the season?" Ah, he said, "It's great." This is obviously not going great. But I also asked him a question about. It was part of a longer back and forth, but about if he remembered any trends that kind of upstarted and then failed in the NBA. And he said, "Could you give me an example?" I said, "I was hoping that you could give me one." And he said, "Why don't you ask Caitlin?" So I'm asking you. Do you remember any trends that have upstarted and failed in the NBA?
Are we going to be talking about the ball pressure? Is this where this is going to go? That like some teams take on trends thinking maybe they can implement them only to find out later on maybe that's not what our team is built for. I mean, in a way, the Nate Bjorkgren Indiana Raptors were this. I mean, he was coaching the team that he wanted, not the team that he had. Difference being is they never made the adjustments to be the team that they were. Whereas I think somewhat, and we'll get into this, the Raptors were probably for the first 5 games trying to do some things that were trendy that didn't necessarily suit this roster completely, but the adjustments have been made and they're doing a lot of things that really do suit this roster now. So that's what
That,
pops off at top of mind because that's what's going on in the NBA right now. I mean, I think this is kind of what a lot of people talked about coming out of that finals run, or you and I talked about it, I guess, on after Game 7, that there's not going to be a lot of teams that can replicate what the Oklahoma City Thunder do, and there's not going to be a lot of teams that can replicate what the Indiana Pacers did on both ends of the floor. Because I mean, the entire NBA is averaging more hit-ahead passes this season than in any year in the tracking era, and the
mhm.
Pacers led the league in that last year. Doesn't mean everybody can advance the ball to anybody on the court and that they can punch and spray and coordinate and attack a broken floor in the same way that the Pacers can, even though that can be low-hanging fruit. Early offense is undisputably better than late offense, but it doesn't mean everybody can execute it at that level.
A quick stat: the Raptors' points per possession in transition halfway through the second quarter was 0.25, despite playing a quarter of their possessions in it.
Until
For
the
any
last 3 minutes and 53 seconds when it all came
yes,
roaring back.
so for people who don't know, that is 1 in 8, 1 out of 8 baskets scoring in transition. That I wrote this in the piece. I think is probably equivalent to the famous Celtics media versus Celtics coaches game type points per possession. It's hard to be that poor. The Raptors, I think, after this game will be in the bottom 5 in terms of transition efficiency. But what I want to talk to you about mostly, there's a fun game, but S will cover it in his recap and go through film. I want the broad strokes of the Raptors season according to Caitlin. And so do the listeners. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I forgot to do it at the front end and hype. Caitlin, the big thing is that the Raptors, they are problem solvers in terms of spacing and alignment and trying to get guys doing things in the right roles. You and I have talked about this a little bit on the side. The simplicity of the Raptors offense. Why do you think the simplicity works? Because I don't know what they'll be ranked after this Pacers game, but they were the number 2 half court offense coming into this thing, which is the highest in their franchise history, by the way. Just nuts.
Can we pull up a clip?
Do you want to send me a clip?
I have 2 sets of clips.
Okay. We can pull up a clip. Oh, is this with the crackback rotation?
Right, but it shows an example from last year and how Darko changed it. And then this one is an Iverson cut, which really tough stuff. Okay, so I don't have a current clip from the Pacer game tonight because obviously stuff wasn't cataloged by the time Samson got home. But I did
Mhm.
want to show this from the prior game because Samson and I kind of joked about this the other day when we were talking, not during the podcast, about Samson, when's the last time that you saw before this Raptors team run as many Iverson actions as what you're watching the Toronto Raptors run right now? Like, what's another team that you can think did this a lot?
I have no idea. The Raptors ran a version of this, but a straight Iverson, I can't remember the last team that was running it this much.
The last team that I can remember running it this much was TJ Warren in the bubble when he was scoring like 50 points per game. Like he was just making so much bank out of mid-range, like basic actions in those seeding games. And that's kind of what this reminds me watching. Okay, so when we're talking about like a basic Iverson action, it's 2 players at the elbows and Brandon Ingram cuts off both of them. Why I find this so interesting is they're literally setting the flat screens at both elbows as if this is like TJ Warren in the bubble or early 2000s or sorry, I don't know why there's sound on these. You have to pause it on the prior clip because I'm going to explain the difference.
Okay.
Okay, so watch the catch area where Brandon Ingram gets it when he comes off the 2 flat picks at the elbows. The guy's going to be in rear view pursuit, so he's almost always catching inside the 2-point area, which is what I find so interesting when you're watching the Raptors because a lot of their actions, it feels like to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Darko's very much leaning into, I want to get the best out of who these players already are rather
Mhm.
than stretching or repurposing them to try to extract extra points per possession out of what they could be. They lean into what the strengths are of the players. So if you go to the next clip, just to show how most teams are running Iverson stuff, and then pause it right here. I apologize that it's a Pacers clip. These are the ones that I have in my catalog, but just to show as an example, A lot of teams aren't running the Iverson with two screeners at the elbows flat anymore. They'll run them as a staggered set. So their old friend Bruce Brown is able to run under both of them. And that's why they don't normally run them at the elbows. They run them in a staggered alignment like that in case the guy gets top locked. Then you have room to get to the other side, potentially shed that guy off. You can stop and go and hesitate. You can go over the first screen, under the second screen. And most teams, when they do that, they want to get the guy catching the ball out above the free throw line area extended, like what we just saw where Bruce Brown catches it, where he catches it right there, and then they follow with a secondary screen. They want to get that empty side action. The first option is always going to be for Bruce Brown to reject it, which a lot of teams run this exact sequencing of actions because he has that whole left side of the floor cleared because he's clear outside the 3-point line. If that option isn't there and they take that away, then he has the empty side pick. And then you'll also notice that TJ's standing clear out at the logo. And if they can't get any of that, or if the team switches that, then it's a middle pick and roll. So the point being is why I'm showing these two things is like the Pacers are running a lot of coordinated, as Samson refers to them a lot, order of operations type actions. If not this, then this. And we're running the staggered screens because we want to get as much momentum into that as we possibly can so that we can set this guy up to get the rejection or to can potentially go into other actions. When the Raptors are running this, it is literally just a basic Iverson action, and they are scoring so many points out of this stuff. And it's almost like a flex. It's almost like we know Brandon Ingram is so good that this is
Hmm.
all we have to run. Because I ask you, Samson, like if he doesn't get a shot there, what are they flowing into? Like what
They
are they going to go
do.
to?
So I'll just pull it back here. So if he catches it here, actually what they do, it didn't happen because the Pacers like to go over a lot of stuff, but a lot of what, like you can see CMB is right there. If Ingram is kept above the break, CMB or Mamu will go and set a screen and they'll just fall into pick and roll similar. But the interesting thing is that Ingram, because he is a little bit more of a one note linear player, a lot of times he does just take the Iverson catch and he can reverse pivot on the catch or he can just take it normally and takes it downhill because he's so comfortable with the soft underbelly of the defense. And he hits this shot, very close to where he hit the game winner, just a little bit closer. He is tremendously talented, and so much of the Raptors being, the best sidelines out of bounds team, the best baseline out of bounds. Well, they're not the best. They're the best in both combined. Is yes, some of the actions that they run and some of the sequencing that Darko is able to put up, but also the fact that they're just tossing it to Brandon Ingram. And when a guy shoots, above 50% on his mid ranges and has some of the hardest shot quality in the NBA, but still is able to give this like 59% true shooting efficiency, that is eating innings. That is letting other guys take more limited shots and maintain their efficiency. And somehow he's in here doing the most difficult thing every single time down and maintaining plus efficiency. That is the impressive aspect of Brandon Ingram. That's really what's fueling a lot of the Raptors' fantastic half-court offense, in my opinion.
And even late in the game, they ran him off a basic stagger. And the Pacers were so concerned with him coming off the two picks. It was a meeting of three. And then
Yep.
Jacoby was the ball handler and he just drove past Siakam and got to the rim and finished. Because they had three people converging on him coming off those two picks. Brandon Ingram, second most off-ball screens in the NBA that he has
Yep.
ran off of, second only to Lauri Markkanen. When we're talking about those Iverson actions, he scored more points per direct chance out of Iverson's than Franz Wagner. He scored more points per direct chance out of cross screens than Nikola Jokic. And he scored more points per direct chance out of wide actions. And when I say wide, I don't mean a wide pin down out for him to fly out to three. I mean very close to the hoop. And he scored more out of those than Lauri Markkanen. This
You
is the
s-
Brandon Ingram experience right now. Like
it
based on shot quality on second spectrum, the only person with a lower shot quality than Brandon Ingram is Cam Thomas. And he's way over exceeding what types of shots he's getting. Just incredible shot making from him, which is how another game ended. And now the Raptors have won 9 straight games. So
yeah,
ride the magic carpet.
I certainly. Does that tie in because there's a listener question which is like, why do you, and by the way, both of us were higher on the Raptors than consensus, did a podcast about why we thought it could work, and a lot of what we're discussing here was couched into that, but it has been another level. Brandon Ingram's shot making has been another level. The Raptors have been able to find a connectivity on defense that has allowed them to get to another level. Are you just looking at like a prolonged inferno stretch from Brandon Ingram, or do you genuinely feel as if you've missed something in the analysis of this team, and that's why because they're better now than I thought they would be, and I'm sure they're better now than you thought they would be, at least record wise and rankings wise.
Oh yeah, I'm not taking any victory laps here. If anybody asked me over the summer, if anybody asked me over the summer, I did say that the two teams that I thought were most underrated, just based on opinions I was reading online, were the Pistons and Raptors. But if anybody had asked me who were the top
Well,
two seeds in the East, I wouldn't have said the Pistons and the Raptors. Like I wouldn't. I thought it was ridiculous that people thought the Raptors were going to be a lottery team or a late play-in team. That seemed absurd given the inflection of talent that they were adding back. But I wouldn't have foreseen this. No, I guess, like, if we continue from the offensive standpoint, there's things that I noticed detail-wise that I wouldn't have expected the 5 starters to be optimized in the way that they were. Because it kinda goes back to what I was talking to you about yesterday with, like, clustered spacing and where people are being told to go underneath rollers or potentially into driving lanes, where in the past you have been like, "Oh, that's a big no-no." But then when you watch the Raptors do it, you're like, "This is actually an advantage, and this is actually really smart." So, I brought those clips too.
well, even just I don't have a clip for it, but like at that Iverson and then the screener follows, and you just run a pick and roll. Then the Raptors run the wheel action, and Ingram brings guys up higher in the mid range, and so that baseline cut is a lot more
I
available
believe they
on.
call it rafter.
Yes, for people who don't know, that is a reverse singer of uh, of the joke I made on our podcast or on Caitlin's podcast yesterday. Okay, so we have
This
more
is from
film from
last year.
Caitlin.
This is
Okay,
from last year, and this is why I wanted to explain the difference. So when you and I did the preseason pod, I was like, I think they should run more flat pick and rolls for Emmanuel quickly because he's not a guy who goes to the extra dribble that could allow him to get in deeper. And then if they had Jakob Pertl in the dunker spot, I said they should mirror the ball more often and have him screen the dunker spot guy to open up a longer driving lane for quickly. I would have never imagined what Darko actually envisioned to make that much better. So this is an example from last year. If you go ahead and run the clip of them just running that guard to guard screen, flat pick and roll. Typically, the guy in the dunker spot is always spaced opposite from the ball handler, like what you just saw from Jakob Pertl. This is another example where it's IQ and Scottie, and you see the guy in the dunker again opposite, so that the person on the weak side, when they help the helper, when the rim protector steps up, when the guy in the dunker spot stops up to stop the ball, the guy on the weak side has way more time to sink from the corner to the helper rotation. I thought that this was really inventive when I watched the game in Indiana against the Raptors because they're almost always running some type of two-man action between RJ Barrett and Scottie Barnes. That might be like a split action. It might sometimes be an empty side pick and roll or an empty handoff. And sometimes, like Samson said, it was literally just the wheel action that Scottie then would cut himself into the spacing. The ball then gets fired to Quickly, and they run a pick and roll between Quickly and Pirtle. And what you'll notice is Scottie's always sneaking underneath the pick and roll to mirror the ball and be in the strong side dunker spot rather than opposite from the ball. So if you pause it when he sneaks over there, look at what position, pause it right there. Look how tough that's making things on Jarris Walker. Because in the clips we watched before, that would be on the weak side where that sink defender would go down to the dunker spot. It's on the strong side. So if you're Jarris, you're thinking, I can't come off of Brandon Ingram in the strong side corner to crack down on Scottie Barnes if Pascal has to help. You're in a really tough spot there because you're either leaving Scottie exposed under the basket or you're leaving Brandon Ingram in the strong side corner. So if you go ahead and run that, you'll see like they got the same basket from Jakob Pertl at the rim over and over again in the third quarter of this game until they ended up taking Pascal off of Scottie Barnes. And then you see the reverse of it, that if you actually do try to help from the weak side when it's a single side tagger, they're also putting more tension on the offense by lifting RJ Barrett above the break to the wing. And then look how long that closeout rotation is for Pascal. Like most teams are not going to help from the weak side on that when it's only one guy. They're going to have to do it from the strong side. And then you're in a really impossible position between two potential all-stars and Brandon Ingram and Scottie Barnes. So like you wouldn't normally think, you wouldn't tell somebody, hey, go cut into somebody else's driving lane. But again, like to me, that's Darko looking at the roster at all 5 players and being like, let's let all of these guys be who they actually are. We can let Scottie catch attacking passes in the dunker spot. He has great vision from the dunker spot, just like making that pass to RJ Barrett above the break. We're using Jakob Pertl's really good, solid screen craft. We're not relying on Emmanuel Quickly to have to get all the way to the rim.
I think it's a great way to utilize the players on the roster. I when I was breaking down some of the Raptors plays that I thought that they would run prior to the season, and I included the Iverson for Brandon at the very top of things, I didn't think it would be quite as much as we had been seeing it. But I do think that the Raptors right now are a good mix of future facing and harkening back to the old, because you
Exactly.
can
Yeah.
you can go back and find things that work. And honestly, something that gets phased out can, be born anew in the NBA, because defensive the defensive stop might be elsewhere, and the defense might be wired to take something else away. And so there you go. Suddenly you're living in a new area with the exact same thing. It's like just offense can be reborn in so many different ways. And we see different iterations. Like the Raptors are running triangle offense in the clutch. Like they're running a cross screen, but then it's into triangle concepts and like pinch post. And well, we'll see what happens here. That is like, yes, there's triangle concepts in so many things, but it is a bygone era to some degree. That is Phil Jackson. That is Bulls. That is Lakers. That's Michael Jordan, Kobe and Shaq. It doesn't have the same place in the league as it once did. And the Raptors, here they are at 7-2 in their clutch record. And Brandon Ingram, his actions being like pay dirt so often. As you said, he scores more on cross screens than Nikola Jokic. Okay, what the hell? It's just the Raptors, they've done, I think, a fantastic job of what you and I talked about, role normalization, and then just guys exceeding within it. And it's not every guy every night. Like tonight, Jamal Shed, severe, like way worse than other games. Why? Because the Pacers, the gaps aren't as open for him, and he can't threaten with the pass the same way because of how he's being guarded. So it becomes like, are you going to be a scorer? Are you multifaceted? Not right now. Okay, tough night. But they also get 13 points on 5 of 10 shooting from Jacoby Walter, and a pretty good turn defensively from him as well. That depth and the ingenuity from the coaching staff to go to what's new and to rely on what's old, I'm pretty happy. I mean, I'm overjoyed, quite frankly. 9 wins in a row, and these types of rankings on both sides of the floor. They just won a game with 97 points. The early part of the season, they're allowing 130 every game. I mean, come on, man.
I
It's
mean,
been quite a
I
switch.
must point out very briefly on that 2 years ago, I was covering a hot girl basketball team that would put up 150 points regularly, and I remember I told you, I believe almost to this very day, I said, "Don't you can't judge the Pacers are vanity sizing. Their defense is so bad that it will make the opposing team's offense look much better." Now it's the reverse of this. They have the worst effective field goal percentage of any team in the last 10 years, Samson. So you actually can win games against them scoring less than 100 points. It's very possible because that's how far the offense has fallen. It will make your defense look better generally if you play a game against the Pacers.
Okay, fair enough. Touche.
Of course,
Point.
all these wins have not been against the Pacers. Merely 2 of them have been. So,
Yes, and one versus a much worse and better version of them. This was a better Pacers team than they played the first time, in my opinion. I thought it was. I don't know where it. I guess maybe they're all losses to you, but to me, I felt like I was watching a better team. And I guess also the Raptors, they miss RJ offensively.
yeah.
That ability, Trey summed it up perfectly on the last podcast. It's a lot of horizontal when you don't have RJ in there. He gets you going vertical pretty quickly. Even for the warts of his game, you can really tell his value. Anything else offensively? I guess Scottie, do you want to talk a little bit more about his role on offense and how you've seen it? I know you haven't just seen this game, but over the couple that you have seen in the film in between, what have you made of his usage? Because that is a hot button topic here in Toronto.
Oh, hopefully I don't say the wrong thing on the wrong side and have people after us in the comments section. I mean, I think it's somewhat up and down. Like, I love that action right there, and that's really predicated on Scottie's vision and putting him in a different position on the court. I like the overall role on him getting to go against weaker defensive assignments generally. I mean, he was getting the assignment against Benedict Mathurin there late in the game, and you can go get him a cross match because they had to put Siakam onto Brandon Ingram. But there are also times like I think some of the ones that I've seen here recently, whether that was against Brooklyn and at times in this one, despite how many points he and Brandon combined for against a Pacer team that doesn't have a lot of defensive wings right now, is I still think his driving game needs to get better and getting from point A to point B. I still think some of the advantage creation probably isn't exactly where you want it to be, but I think that that feels nitpicky given that a lot of times you can look at the box score and be like, well, this guy still had a tremendous game. Like I think he's pretty much if they continue even close to this level of production, he's going to be at the All-Star game in February. So
I think he doesn't have the scoring talent that Ingram does. But that's why they trade. If he had the scoring talent that Ingram did, they would have tried to build this team a different way. They
yep.
wouldn't have traded for Brandon Ingram. But Scottie, despite having a lot of holes in his driving game and being kind of his offensive usage, it depends really on what his teammates are able to create, one, and two, what the game plan is from the opponent. It allows seams for him to really thrive in. In this game, the lack of forwards to bash and smash with him created a pathway to copious free throws. And some games, his on ball reps, depending on how the opposing front court is looking, can result in a lot of paint touches. And then him moving downhill can be this big, great points per possession machine, of course. But he's still figuring out everything on the in between. I like that the mid range is not a crutch, but a counter. I like that he is willing to push and transition. I like that he'll still play in the pick and roll. And I like that he's a smart off ball mover and that, not all passes, not all assists are made equal. His ball reversals in the half court to beat shifting defenses and create easier looks for others as a connective player, really good.
He passes
Defensively,
the ball incredibly quickly in transition to the laydown. Like it's a
yes.
split second. And his numbers as the bring up ball handler after he grabs a rebound are absurd. The last time I looked at that, which don't quote me because I have not looked at it recently, but I was looking at that for a different reason, and I want to say it was like 1.3 points per chance when Scottie Barnes grabs a rebound and is the bring up ball handler for the Toronto Raptors. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's partially why, and I've gone this a dead horse I'm beating here because I've mentioned it on the podcast a few times, but it's because I got so much pushback for saying I thought that Scottie was an elite transition player, and despite him being very very low in his points per possession per synergy, but those numbers don't capture his playmaking. They don't capture it at all, and I mean this year he's been one of the best transition scorers in terms of scoring. But on the whole, I think he's just an extremely strong player, getting the ball up court, playing fast, and playing open. And this year, the early part has really validated a lot of that stuff. I think he's been tremendous. Defensively, I mean, he is the best player on the team. Brandon Ingram scores better, but Scottie is the shoe in for the All Star game of this group so far. What Nikias came on here and said, start circling the wagons for an all defense spot. Does he get into that conversation for you?
easily, easily. I mean, in
Yeah.
that stretch where the Pacers again, I hate to bash the team that I cover, but in the stretch when they went almost 5 minutes without scoring a basket, he quietly was the impetus for most of that.
Yeah.
So Siakam gets that switch against Emmanuel quickly. And what I think Scottie is so good at, and I'll use the terminology that I use for Tyrese offensively, I refer to Tyrese as negative space and art all the time. And you're seeing now the contour that isn't there, that he isn't there to provide anymore. Scottie is negative space and art on defense. So he walks the line between straying too far and helping just enough really well. So, like, when Siakam had that switch at the top of the key against quickly late in the second quarter, Scottie's just acting as a buffer, a barrier. Like, there was no pass to make out of that. And then it ends up, one of them ended up in the blind double that Siakam got the foul on. The reason why Andrew Nemhard got the discontinued dribble was because of what Scottie was doing away from the ball. That's like 3 plays in a row that were, he wasn't the on ball defender, but he was very much affecting it away from the ball. Let alone the play late in the fourth quarter when he tried to take a charge against Benedict Mathurin, kind of pulled the chair in a Nemhard like way to get Mathurin off base, and then still was able to catch up and block it at the rim. Like, that play alone was insane. So,
His
yeah.
court coverage has just been. I remember talking to PD Webb, after Scottie got drafted and being like, how do you see the defense? And him saying, it's not the point guard defense stuff. It's not the, jumping out on a point guard and jumping out on one. He's like, it's the court coverage stuff where he'll be truly special. And the way, and, his on ball defense is not special. His deny defense is really strong,
Unless
though,
he's
which helps
forcing
his.
Mathurin into a backcourt violation,
Yeah.
then it is.
Correct. But his deny defense really helps him put him in shorter clock scenarios as an on-ball defender. It helps lower usage for other star players depending on how they use him. But that off-ball stuff, he flex tape. He's covering everything. He's been so impressive. Um, I I'm a little bit shocked at the amount. Not a lot of people are talking about the defense, and I thought they would be because while he's obviously better right now than he was last year, he was also really strong last year, and I thought there'd be more momentum. But I guess that's the job of a media and analyst to highlight, and I need to do some work on that.
I mean,
But
there's not a lot of defenders that can go from a next and get back and block a shot. He's kind of like when you watch a dancer doing turns and how they have to spot. That's what he looks like when he's rotating and getting out of rotations. He doesn't lose his place. He always
yeah,
gets able to be able to get out and find it. He's very, very talented at that end of the floor.
defensive proprioception, not talked about a bunch, and a term that got memed to death because people would just start tagging it to like a Jordan Poole play and be like, "Oh, his proprioception's crazy, dude," and then everyone got tired of it. But it's actually quite apt for Scottie Barnes. He obviously leads on the defensive end. The Raptors, after this game, will be rated as a top 5 defense in the NBA. Do you think this is a true tell of their talent? Obviously, the team is better than we had predicted, but do you think that is an accurate snapshot of where they might exist over the course of the season? What do you think they're doing bad, and what do you think the floor is going to fall out of something here?
Yeah, it's interesting because we were kind of opposites on the preseason pod because I was a little bit higher on the overall fit of the offense and was a little bit more concerned about the defense. Mainly because it seemed like they were very committed to the ball pressure, and I didn't really understand how the starting lineup was going to execute that. And they weren't for roughly 5 games. And then they decided that they weren't going to do it. And that bears out in the stats. Like if people want to know, like during that stretch, they picked up in the backcourt on 33 possessions per game. During this winning streak, they're doing it on 17.9. So that's been slashed. Pressure on the bring up ball handler before was 45.6 per game. Now it's 27. So their double team rate is less, despite the fact that I said tonight, like I don't know if I've seen a team auto
Well,
blind doubles
when
more than they
Jacoby's
do.
out there, the backcourt pickup and the blind doubles, they go a little bit bigger. So you're catching a snapshot of it, but it's the blind doubles are not at the same rate usually.
So I think, like in a way, it kind of reminds me of what we saw in Game 6 of the NBA Finals when the Pacers decided to quote unquote pull the chair on the pressure. They're like, let's bring this back to half court and then let's up our intensity in the half court. That's kind of what the defense, at least for the Raptors against the Pacers in this particular game, looked like. I don't think it looks like that necessarily every game, but that's had a trickle down effect on other areas of the defense because now they're fouling a lot less, like tremendously less. Like they had the 28th highest foul rate while they were attempting to do the ball pressure. Now that's at like 14th. So I think all that matters, and they're also crashing less offensively, which I find to be interesting. It looks to me by my eye and by the numbers that they're not really going with the tagging up anymore. And that's almost one of the biggest changes because during the first 5 games, 3 offensive players crashing on 17 possessions. During this win streak, only 10 per game, and their transition defense has gone from 23rd to 4th. So I don't think they're sending as many people as what they were doing last season. They've also dialed back the pressure. So in a way, almost all of it is more conservative than what they were doing over roughly the first 5 games. And yet I look at all of this and their defense on the drives is still quite poor. They're still giving up a very high blow by rate, which I think is somewhat intentional with a few of the players. Like I Grady is not a good defender, but Grady has a monstrous blow by rate, I think, because they've just decided we're going
They
to be a
peel it
very high
next to him.
peel switch team. So and that kind of is an interesting topic all in itself because how much were they peeling last year by your eye? A lot or not much?
I didn't see it that much. I don't have you looked up the numbers?
Nobody tracks peel switching. That's what I'm
Oh,
asking.
okay. Yeah, I didn't see it. I thought it was reminiscent of Rick's like guard your yard type of stuff. Like we're
Yeah.
instilling things for the future.
And do you think that that paid off? Like, do you see dividends from that, or was it just like, you know what, we're not really sticking these matchups. Let's go back to the peeling. Because for the Pacers, it was incremental. Like at the time, I was like, they need to be peeling some of this stuff. They felt that peel switching led to complacency. They wanted to teach people to guard their individual matchups, and I think that they're actually ended up being some benefit from that, where they did build better habits. But for a player like Tyrese, peel switching was right in his wheelhouse because he's so good at blocking threes. He's so good at playing aerial ace on the backside. He can peel into passing lanes. And like, I mean, when they played the Pacers in the last game, Grady peel switched and threw a closeout. Like, that's how he was getting the layups off of peel switches, the
Hmm.
3 in a row that he got. So I think that's part of it, but the numbers on the drive still aren't good. So then when I look at all of it, I struggle with it a little bit because I think that the defense is definitely better than what it was the first 5 games. Like, that's a big
Hmm.
obvious, like, we can all see and know that. I don't know that I necessarily think it's as good as what it's performed during this win streak. Simply because the opponent 3-point percentage is insane. Like, insane. And it wasn't helped by playing the Pacers tonight either. But like, just to give people a snapshot of this, before tonight's game, 45.4 effective field goal percentage opponents on threes. That's 30th in the NBA during this win streak. And opponents have underperformed their shot quality on those shots by 9%. And no team in the last 10 years has underperformed their percentage shot quality on threes by that margin. It's never happened. So, like, there's going to be normalization on what teams are shooting there. And in part because when I'm watching the scheme, like, just to give another example, Tyrese called a play in Indiana from the sideline specifically because Grady was guarding Talon Peter. And he was like, let's run 1-4 flat. Talon Peter's the screener. Scottie recognized this and the things that we were just talking about and was like, I will pre-switch that. Grady,
Hmm.
you stay back here. And that meant Grady was on Pascal. So TJ threw the ball to Pascal. And Scottie was like, we can't leave Grady on Pascal. I will, do this kind of loose double team that I was referring to. Pascal recognizes the loose double, throws it to Talon Peter. Talon Peter probably has 8 feet of space and misses a 3 in very typical Pacer fashion. So I look at that and how much scaffolding is required at times and how much is being asked of Scottie Barnes and the fact that opponents are underperforming the 3-point percentage to this extent. And I think there's going to be some normalization. That does not mean that I think the defense is going to be bad. I just don't think it's going to be quite this good.
Yeah. And normalization could still have the Raptors at the end of the season with a very healthy, like,
Yeah.
oh, teams underperformed, because normalization doesn't mean it's going to swing all the way back to zero. It just
No.
probably isn't going to sit at 9% for much longer.
I
It's
don't think it's going to be teams are shooting like 30% against the Toronto Raptors for an entire season.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can do so many things. That's what I wrote my piece about for this Raptors Pacers game, is that the Raptors trying to do so many things, and then it was just shot making. And sometimes that's what it is. And a lot of defense can be like, the process can be good. The Raptors have a lot of good process out there. They stay connected a lot more during this stretch because they're in smaller spaces. It's easier with 5 guys. Brandon Ingram is giving you more than he was giving at the start, I think, because it's over smaller spaces. His wingspan helps keep him in, etc. There's things moving in the right direction, but they are not. I don't think they're super responsible for the missed threes. In fact, the conventional wisdom is that you can't control for 3-point percentage, you control for 3-point volume defensively. So
And
the
location.
and
And
location,
location.
exactly,
Yeah.
which can affect percentage to some degree. Anyway, the Raptors, if you put the gun to my head, say, do they finish top 5 defensively this year? I don't think so, but they don't have to. They've made steps as a defense. The work continues. Can I ask you about pace? So I asked Darko about this, and I know it'd give you anxiety if I said I was going to ask you first before telling you what he said. So Darko, when I said, "Hey, the first 4 games you guys are, or the first 5 games you guys are playing super fast, and then during this win streak you guys are playing pretty slow. What's happening there?" And he was like, I don't know. I haven't paid attention to that, but I actually want us to play faster. And then they played a super slow game against the Pacers where like neither team scored. Um, I think he wants pace in the offense in their actions. But what do you make of the Raptors being a slow team that wins over the stretch?
What do you mean by they're a slow team, and what do you think he means by he wants them to play faster?
By play faster, I think he wants pace in their actions. And I don't necessarily think it means exactly just like we're doing constant hit aheads. I don't think it means that they play from whoever gets the ball advanced. I don't think it's like the Pacers because they actually fail at that play style. And I think they have the data that they can't trust everybody go up court. That's my view of it. But pace, meaning that like play quick, always make the quick decision. But what I've seen is that they've actually embraced playing slow, calming things down, and being quite orderly on offense at times, rather than just like verve pace, verve pace, verve pace.
So that's what you think is causing it. That's what you think is causing the slowdown in terms. So you're terming what's playing fast in terms of the fact that they rank 20th in pace right now over this win streak.
Well, they since October 30th, their offensive pace is 16th fastest. It's 24th fastest after a dead ball, and their transition frequency is still first.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm referring to. Their defensive pace is 12th slowest after the dead ball, 7th slowest. Transition frequency is 4th fewest. That's where we're sitting on all this pace stuff.
I guess I'd probably sit somewhere in the middle because if I was Darko, I wouldn't be thrilled that they rank 16th in average time to first action. If I was any coach, I would probably want to rank higher in that. I don't want to take that long getting to the first play that I'm running. Um, but the trade-off of that is that they've limited turnovers much better than they were through the first 5 games. Their rebounding has improved. I'm guessing that probably has something to do with them sending more players to the defensive glass, which might be limiting how much they're getting out. But I don't necessarily think so because they're first in transition frequency. And when I looked up their average number offensive man advantage, they're third in that category, which leads me to think that they're still getting out fairly frequently, or else you wouldn't be loading up that much in transition and you wouldn't rank that highly in your offensive man advantage. So they're managing to walk that line pretty well. The only other reason I could think of maybe why they might be playing quote unquote slower is Emmanuel quickly has fewer possessions as the bring up ball handler. More of those have shifted to some of the wings, and wing initiations tend to be a little bit slower, but I don't think that's a bad thing for the health of their offense. So when I'm looking at some of the reasons why this might be happening, I'm like, oh, fewer turnovers, that's good. Improved rebounding, that's good. More wing initiation, more Emmanuel quickly spotting up around the wings. I think that's probably generally good. And then the other big one is that they've been highly efficient in the last 4 seconds of the shot clock. They rank like fourth in points per possession there. So it's almost like they're a team that might be quote unquote playing slower because of the averaging out of the fact that they're playing early and they're playing late. And I generally kind of like those types of teams in the playoffs. And especially like when you're playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, that is the exact type of team that
Hmm.
you would want to be. So I don't necessarily see that as a massive negative. I might want to get into the actions a little bit quicker, and I can understand why he would say that. But maybe another really underrated factor here might be that they're applying less ball pressure because a lot of the teams that apply a lot of ball pressure also tend to play very fast. Those two things go hand in hand in ways that people don't always think about because I think a lot of times we think of ball pressure and that we're moving the opponent deeper into the clock, and certainly that can be the case. But for me watching the Pacers, I know that they applied as much ball pressure as they did in the one round against the Milwaukee Bucks in 2024 because the Bucks were a slow isolation team and they wanted to speed them up. They wanted to inject pace into that series, and they felt like the ball pressure at times could go hand in hand with how fast they wanted to play. But when I'm looking at the overall numbers here, I'm thinking that a lot of the reasons why they might be playing quote unquote slower are actually probably positives and have contributed to why they're winning right now. So
I think so too. I think
that's
it's
kind of the
they're
way I
trying.
view it.
This is their means to exhibit a little bit more control over the game in a way that suits their roster. At least for this portion of the season. Every
Yeah.
team has trends, but it's worked. I just thought it was interesting because of the Raptors, the lip service paid to this team. In I went to training camp, S and I were there, and all of the lip service is about being incredibly fast, picking up, and just watching everything in the first little bit like melt away. And it's, Darko, he talked about the speed paradox is what he called it. And he must say something different to the players because when I asked CMB about it, he was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" He was like, "He might call it something different." But the speed paradox is something that Darko says, like, when you're operating at 100% capacity, you lose the ability to be accurate, basically. So he's like, we're trying to figure out what 85% is so that we can maximize speed and accuracy at the exact same time. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting to hear a coach talk about it in this manner. And so I think the Raptors were at 100, maybe now they're at like 65, and they're going to keep trying to work their way to their 85 or whatever Darko deems to be 85. But I, how do you view Darko right now? I guess because it's tough to assess coaches. It's like almost impossible. But you're probably a person I trust really well to do it. in against a lot of people in the industry. How do you feel about Darko right now?
That's interesting that he phrased that way because the Pacers, not to bring it back to them again, but they really were, as I referred to them, the immaculate exception in their ability to play that fast while limiting turnovers
Yes.
to that extent. And there's not going to be a lot of teams that can replicate because that's a special trait of Tyrese Halliburton's that not a lot of people have. And that doesn't mean that the Pacers are the one good, true way of playing basketball. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in grand theories of basketball. The Raptors have found their own way, and certainly there's some bits and pieces of other things that perhaps teams are doing, but they're going to find their own path, and clearly they have. They've won 9 straight games doing it, what they're doing. I think overall, like I think you have to be very pleased with what Darko's doing and the pieces that are here, at least especially when based by consensus, where a lot of the thought process here was that this was kind of like a restaurant that you go to with like a 50-page menu, and you're like, why is this restaurant serving sushi and spaghetti and breakfast all at the same time? And like, I like sushi, I like spaghetti, I like breakfast, but I don't really want it all at the same place. Like, he's found a way to cook all of those things and have them all taste really good at the same time. And he tried to do some of those trendier things, obviously, in the first 5 games, and then they had practice, which I found that quote that I think he told you to be hilarious. Like,
Yeah.
well, we couldn't practice because of the Blue Jays, but generally, like practice time, I don't think that that's probably something that we in the media cover enough because that changed the Pacers season. Like, literally, them not making it in the NBA Cup and having 4 days off fundamentally changed their season because they altered things and they got healthy. So clearly, this is in the early going changed the Raptors' trajectory from what you and I were talking about after their like first 5 or 6 games. And I think a lot of that has to go to him and what they were likely putting in behind closed doors, as well as just having overall buy-in from the players on the court. Because that's another thing. I heard Steve Clifford once give a quote that I thought was very intuitive at a coaching clinic, in which he said, he was talking about coaching, I believe, the Dwight Howard era Magic versus one of his Hornets teams. And he's like, that Magic team, he's like, they didn't do a lot together. Like, they didn't really speak that much. The Hornets team that I coached, lots of those guys were very close. They went out to dinners. They did a lot of things. He's like, that's not team chemistry. Team chemistry
Can
is watching what the guys do on the bench during the game and watching what they do on the court. That's the team chemistry that matters. So I think that you can see that, and it's pretty palpable when you watch the Raptors play the games that I've seen, at least.
they have the conga line, and it's getting attention now. They do the conga line, but they've been doing that for years, even when they're terrible. I talked to Emmanuel about this. It's so great that you brought this up because Emmanuel was saying that all the time they spent together in the summer pays off now, and I was like, how do you? And he was like, I think our team spent the most time together in the summer compared to every other team in the NBA. I was like, how do you convince guys if other teams aren't doing it as much? How do you get them? And he was like, I think it's because they're young and they don't know any better. He's like, they're just a lot of the guys are coming out of college and they think we're all supposed to be together all the time. So we are during the summer and we all work out together and play together and scrimmage together. He's like, by the time you get to like 7, 10 years in the league, you kind of do your own things during the summer. Now the Raptors are just so interwoven as a unit, and you can see it. It's a very close, for lack of a better term, the vibes are very strong around this team. Darko has spent a lot of time trying to curate these vibes. He was like the guy who's like, smile. There were so many things to be happy about in life. And now there's things to actually be happy about, which is what I asked him about tonight. I was like, hey, team was really bad for a lot of reasons outside of your control. The team's really good. How does it feel to be coaching a good team? And he was like, the work isn't done. We strive every day. And I was like, hell yeah, dude. I'm glad to hear it.
I don't have anything
Uh,
to add to that. I haven't talked to Darko, so I can't really add
oh,
any cool personal stories.
also, Steve Clifford, I'm glad you watched that. He is so good. That is the only reason I go to games is because I don't really collect quotes. I don't really collect quotes for stories. I just talk to coaches and then I paraphrase them on this podcast. That is like that's the function of it. And Steve Clifford is like top 3 in the NBA to ask questions to. He's pretty great.
You're basically me as a child. I just went around and tried to listen to as many coaches as I possibly could to try to understand basketball better so I'd be able to do this job.
Yeah. Rick is really great at rejecting your question, rejecting its premise, and then answering it. It's really funny.
I didn't run into those issues when I podcasted with him. He was
Well,
very
I
generous with me.
yes. Well, he is actually much more generous with me now since I went and met him, obviously. But I think before he knew, I was like the annoying guy who was like, he's like, why are you asking me about tactics, man? Buzz off, like. And now I'm a little bit more aware of the types of question I should ask him, and he's very giving in his
If
answers.
I come to Canada, will I get to have a meet and greet with Darko?
I can try and swing something, yeah. I can't even get him on the podcast here though. Asymmetry in these coach relationships you and I have. Is there anything else Raptors that you think is interesting or want to talk about before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think the NBA Cup's interesting. How interested are you in the NBA Cup and the Raptors advancing to it?
I love the NBA Cup. I like the structure of the Premier League. I like that there's a few different things to accomplish. I don't really like rings culture. Obviously, that's the number one thing. You want to win that, of course. Uh, but I love the idea that like there's multiple things you can win. I love the idea of imbuing meaning into this other cup. I like that. It's the rock skip. How do you feel about it?
I'm excited for it, and this is why I wanted to briefly close out talking to the Raptors fan base about the NBA Cup because I've experienced both sides of it. So, 2 years ago, the Pacers had a very similar magical run going through the NBA Cup and advancing, and it was very important that they had that experience and those reps. I felt, especially when they played the Lakers in the finals of that, because the Lakers were very uniquely positioned to blitz Tyrese Halliburton because Anthony Davis provides a lot of length at the point of attack on those screens, but he also can be very difficult to thwart when he's the low man and you have to pass out of those. Tyrese, very good at attacking blitz coverage, but the Pacers learned from that. Like, they learned they were ready. They were ready to take on another piece, but also they needed another piece. And it wasn't long after that that they called up the Raptors and they're like, hey, can you give us Pascal Siakam? And so I felt that there was a lot of intel from that because there really was extra game planning. There was extra game planning in every knockout game of that. So I hope the Raptors fans can enjoy getting to see how their team gets covered when an opponent's taking a little bit more extra time for game planning in the way that I got to cover that when it was the Bucks and the Lakers in Las Vegas. And then the second year, it was also very meaningful for them for the reasons that I said. The cup runneth empty. We did a whole podcast on it. They lost all
Yep.
4 games, and I felt like having that break was actually very valuable to them. And then they were also very lucky because the 2 games that they got out of it were against lottery teams. So they kind of got to hit the ground running when they got out of there. But I'm going to enjoy watching this Raptors run continue, and hopefully they can go to Las Vegas and have a similar run as the Pacers had. And I guess that's the other thing that I would say. Enjoy the winning for however long it lasts. You can't control what opponents you're playing. You can't control that you've played this Pacer team twice during this win streak, or the Nets twice, or the Wizards twice, or whoever it is, or whatever injured roster. You just have to play the teams that are in front of you and hope that the team continues to get better while they're doing that, that they learn things about themselves while they're doing it. And getting to cover winning basketball doesn't last forever. 4 months
Yep.
ago, I was covering a team in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, and I'm currently covering the worst season in franchise history. So I think you should enjoy winning in whatever form that it comes.
Well, if you want to cover some winning basketball, I might have a publication for you. I think the Raptors will end up playing Miami, and I with
That's an interesting
And
one.
Bam and Ware, I think we're going to see a freak show defense against the Raptors. I think that would be very interesting matchup wise. See what Spo cooks up.
How do you
Caitlin,
feel about them guarding a team almost completely in isolation for a whole game?
uh, we'll see. They they're so unique. You cross that bridge when you come to it. I guess I don't even know how to theorize it right now. Once it's confirmed, because I don't even know if I've done the matchups correctly. Then I'll put my brain to it. Thank you for putting your brain to this. I know you do a lot of work beforehand, and I'm glad we could do more podcasting together. With the Raptors is more of a focus, where I'm the expert for just a small glorious moment.
I hope I can hold a candle to crossing over and trying to cover a Raptors team in the same way that you were able to do it with me through 2 playoff runs. But
Ugh.
I do have one thing that I want to say before I get out of here, and it's going to be a little bit grouchy, so people will have to prepare themselves. The last time I was on this podcast, I had a bottle of Mountain Dew. I made an appeal to Mountain Dew. They did not heed my plea. And I just want to tell the executives and marketing folk at the Mountain Dew Corporation, you'll notice I do not have a bottle of your beverage this evening, and I have not purchased it any more times since I was on this show. So that means that by not sponsoring this podcast, you have literally cost yourself tens of dollars. And who knows who else followed me and boycotting your product because you refuse to be a sponsor. I think that you need to think long and hard about this, because I did tell you that the Raptors were going to be a better team and that you needed to ride this wave on the way up.
Yeah, the
And it
price
has
of the brick
happened.
going up, man. Price of the brick going
Get
up.
with it, Mountain Dew.
Yeah,
Won't be
that's
buying
funny.
your product until you start having a little thing up in the corner here that says sponsoring the Pull Up Tray Pod.
That would be fun. Caitlin, thank you so much for coming on. If anybody really liked Caitlin's analysis, for me, it's the best in the world. You won't find any better. You can support her Patreon, Basketball She Wrote. Yes, it does feature the Pacers. Yes, you can also learn a million other things because the Pacers are the muse of Caitlin's basketball analysis, not the end all be all. I learn from her every time we talk, and I think everyone does. Thank you so much for coming on, Caitlin. Thank you so much for listening in, listeners, viewers, and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hype, all that good stuff. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, from myself and Caitlin, have a blessed day and goodbye.